future video. Oh wait, I totally messed that up. I totally forgot to say like and subscribe. Okay, one more take. Hi everyone, it's Celeste and welcome to my channel. My channel is all about cosplay. I teach you tutorials on how to make the outfit, how to do the makeup so you can become the character of your dreams. Today's cosplay is actually Snow White. Wow. Snow White from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, of course. But you're probably thinking this outfit right here isn't Snow White. Wrong! It is Snow White. This is the theatrical poster version of it. It's not Snow White from Once Upon a Time, and no, it's not this Snow White, and it's also not this Snow White. So I will be doing two versions of Snow White today. This is actually a reversible cosplay. I love being able to have different types of cosplays, so I think it's really fun and crazy. This is what the first part looks like, and then I'll be showing you what the blue part looks like. I'm really excited to be showing you this tutorial for anyone who's new at cosplaying, and I hope if you have any questions to leave me a comment down below. I'll help you with your cosplay journey. So let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. I'm going to be revisiting this pattern 5799 from Simplicity. I'm going to be using that vest pattern. It looks really nice and I think it would be really suitable for the shape of Snow White. I'm going to be using the same blue taffeta that I used for my Tifa cosplay. I'm going to pin down the pattern pieces, following the arrows, and then cut it out. Like a puzzle, pin your bodice together so you know the right pieces fit together. When you're happy with the amount of pins you've stuck into these poor fabric pieces, sew it all together. I found this in my stash and I think it's really pretty. This little lace applique of flowers and leaves. I think this would be great on Snow White. So if I just put it here, it just shines so nicely. I'm actually going to take this with me and look for some gold trim because I have no gold trim that I want to use. But I did find these for the bottom of the skirt that I could use. So it looks really nice. I think I'm going to do that because Disney seems to do that with a lot of their skirts. I could say I'm kind of going for this look because of this, but still trying to retain the original properties of this and then kind of going for this super shiny princess look. I was lucky enough to go out and find a lot of zip ties, so these will act as my corset boning. Stop it! I was able to get this trim and it's very similar to, it was the only one that they had, but it's extremely similar to the lace applique, if not exact, which makes me really happy. And I picked up some gold thread, so when I'm sewing it down, it won't be something awful. I'm going to add the gold trim down the center front first, and then I'm going to work on the reversible brown side. For this trim, I sewed down both left and right sides. I took out that same pattern from before, and now I'm pinning it down to this brown taffeta and cutting it out. After I cut it out, I assembled it together. I went ahead and ironed down the seams so they lay nice and flat. And we want to do that because we are going to be adding these. This is my first time ever actually using zip ties instead of corset boning. So I'm going to fold these over, iron them again, and create channels on this part. Because this is the lining and it's going to be semi-reversible, I want to make sure that I have enough space for all of the zip ties to go in. I could put it here, but I think I don't want the extra seam being shown. So I'm going to just start here and here where I usually have the most problems making it lay straight. When you have curved seams like this, make sure you clip them. Before I put the boning into their channels, I sew the two bodice pieces right sides together at the top. I pay attention to the sleeves, making sure they're aligned perfectly before sewing them down. My zip ties are extremely long. I'm going to put them in first to measure them and then cut them to length. I do this for all the channels that I made. Once my boning is in, I turned my garment right sides out and pinned down the top. I'm going to do a top stitch to help it lay flat. Make sure to cut the corners and any of the curves before top stitching it down. Now top stitch as close as you can to the edge of the bodice. Because I'm a weirdo, I sewed my sleeves shut. In hindsight, while doing this voiceover, it made my sleeves really tight. But do I want to go back and change it? No! Anyways, I used hand stitching to close my sleeves together. With the base sleeves done, I'm going to close off the side edges. This would be the correct time to add your ribbon eyelets. But I'm a fool and I had to add these later like the silly goose I am. So go ahead and sew the edges here. I made sure to leave space to add extra boning at the sides because I'm going to be lacing this up like a corset. With the boning in and the sides completed, sew the bottom together. It's okay if this isn't perfect. We are going to be using gold bias tape to cover the bottom and seal it all together. I'm using double fold gold bias tape. So if any of the bottom is uneven, go ahead and trim it off before you apply the bias tape. On one side of the bias tape, I'm going to sew it down with my machine. On the other side, I'm going to slip stitch it so it doesn't show any stitches. I decided to go ahead and grab my trim, and I'm actually going to be sewing this on top of the gold bias tape. One of the things about embroidery is that you could just get like a lace applique. Bowser, do you need to do that? Hello. Okay. If you want, instead, you could actually find a nice lace applique and use that for your embroidery versus you doing it yourself. All you have to do is use the same color thread and tack it down hand and needle. Because this is going to be a reversible outfit for me, I want to make sure that it does not peek to the other side. You want to do the same with the lining, so you just carefully pick the front side only and sew it in. So I began the arduous task of just hand sewing again and yet again. I feel like there's a repetitive theme with Disney costumes where I have to do a lot of hand sewing. So these will be my sleeve fabrics. Don't they look so nice? I thought this was going to be too bright of a color against the blue, but then when I paired it with the red, it just made all the more sense. So it looks very fairy tale-ish. Now the reason why I'm going to be using this color is because this is going to be a reversible corset style thing that I haven't figured out how I'm going to close it. But you know, we'll get there. So first things first, let's just go ahead and throw all these over there and work with this material first so we get the right shape that we want. You guys, remember, I use this pattern in basically everything. That's a lie. But I did use it in my Electra video, so you can see that here. I'm going to be using that puffy sleeve right here on B, like so. So you can see it's laid out here, but not appropriately. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to cut this fuzzy fabric on the inside first, fold it over, and then realize which cutting line I want. Now I understand that this is a large cut because I use this for someone else. I could still cut it for myself. Now go ahead and pin down the sleeve pattern and cut it out. I made sure to cut it out as long as I needed, and then I went ahead and transferred this pattern to the light blue material. I made sure to have enough red scraps so I can sew it into the blue sleeves. To find the placements of the red pieces, I'm going to go ahead and fold the sleeves in half and cut down the center. Then I'm going to go slightly to the left, which I'm going to cut off from there. Since it's already folded in half, that means I'm going to cut twice into the material, so I have both the left and right little red tuft areas. For the red strips, I cut them out to be 1.5 inches. I made sure to have enough so it goes all the way down the sleeve length. Next, pin all the pieces retrospectively back together. Instead of putting the blue pieces together, you're going to put the red pieces in between, sandwiching them. This way, it creates the nice stripes. So this is what we want our sleeves to look like. To get this, take a freehand needle and start 2 inches down on one blue side and join it together on the other blue side, keeping the red part inside the sleeve. This will help create some puffiness and leave it nice and puffy so it's not so flat. Go ahead and do this to all 3 sides at the top and the bottom. So in total, you're going to do this 12 times. You know, 6 times for each sleeve. So 6 times 2 is 12. Go, go. I'm going to pin this together and then we sew. We sew, we sew, we sew. You can see I pleated this so it will fit. Okay, that just ruined all of it. But you can see that I actually pleated this here at the top so that way the other one will fit, because this one actually got smaller, adding the red marks. Now instead you could actually just cut slits in and sew the red marks, but I decided, I'll just cut all of it because that sounds like a little bit more effort, and it was a lot more effort. Do it your way, but make sure to cut the blue fabric to add red slit fabric or glue red fabric on top if you're really lazy. So now I'm just going to go ahead, like I just said, and sew all this top part down first. Because my sleeve is a curve, I made sure to cut out a little bit of the seam allowance so it will lay nicely against the shoulder armhole. Next, turn the sleeve right side out and sew down the cuff edge with a basting stitch. Now take your bicep measurement. Just look at these guns! For the sleeve cuff, I'm going to be using this light brown taffeta that I used for my Eevee cosplay. Before adding the cuff to the sleeves, sew the sleeve seam together with the bodice seam. I'm going to do this by using a safety pin, making sure the color blocking is correct, and then use a ladder stitch to join the seams together. This way, we're going to join the seams and hide the seam at the same time. So it's perfectly reversible. Originally, I cut out 10-inch strips to go around my arm. My arm is pretty thin, but it is definitely too tight. So this does not give me a lot of wiggle room, and it just seems like it's right there onto it. So what I'm going to do is actually just take the rest of this little scrap piece that has this nook here and cut off the rest. This is about 12 inches long. You don't want your sleeves to be so tight that you can't move your arm and you can't get into it. It really pays to keep your scrap materials so you can use it for other projects. To make two symmetrical sleeve cuffs, I'm going to fold the newly cut piece in half and then cut it on this fold. This is the ideal time to make sure that they're perfect rectangles. Next, fold it widthways to make it into a circle and sew it down. This way you can hide the actual seam and don't have any salvage edge showing. You'll notice that my cuff is really wide, and that's because I'm going to fold it in half before I sew it to the sleeve. After I do that, we're going to fold it over like a bias tape, making sure that both sides are very clean with seams. Pin your cuff to your sleeve edge. My sleeve was really big and I had to cut some of it down and re-sew it shut. I still had a bit of extra fabric, so I just pleated it to fit the cuff. Being a no-brainer, I took this to the sewing machine and sewed the cuff down. Next, fold over the cuff to encompass all the raw edges and slip stitch the cuff on the other sleeve. This is going to hide all the raw edges and be perfect for the reversible part of this cosplay. I wanted to give the blue sleeves a bit of extra love, so I decided to add some of the gold trim to the edge of the sleeves. I bet this is going to suck when I try to wear the reversible side. For the back, we're going to actually close it using lots of eyelets. So what I'm going to do is cut up leftover bits of the ribbon to create little loops. This way I can thread ribbon through it. I'm going to start at the top and then measure inch increments and then add a different piece of lace here. I want to use at least 10 on one side. One of the main reasons why we're using loops is because I don't think the idea of using eyelets is proper with this, and I don't want one side of the eyelets to be incorrect, so we're actually just going to use these loops on the gold side. And then when it actually gets secured, it'll pull it over. Feel free to make your strips, your loops, as big as you want. Now that I have all my loopies in place, I'm going to use the sewing machine to lock them down. So for the color, I'm using a crescent shape cut and then drafted it onto some paper and then transferred it to thicker cardboard paper for purposes, tracing purposes. This is the end shape that I ended up with that will go around my neck and be snapped into place. I'm going to be using a really thick interfacing for my collar piece. You can see how thick this is, and yes, it is upholstery interfacing. So I'm going to trace the collar piece to the interfacing first and then cut it out. My fabric of choice is going to be scraps from my wedding dress, more specifically white satin. This is a thinner white satin that I used for my train. First, I'm going to iron it out and then fuse it to the interfacing. This interfacing is really coarse, so I'm going to sew the rest of the satin on the other side of the collar. Make sure to cut off the excess fabric. Taking some really wide leftover white ribbon that I have, and I'm just going to pin it all around the perimeter of this collar piece. Now that everything is sewn together, I'm going to go ahead and pin it down, making sure that it fits correctly, and then I'm going to sew it kind of like a bias tape. I went ahead and sewed snaps at the edges here. So there's one here and then at the other side, so it's removable from my bodice. And then of course I sewed them onto the darker side because of course I'm going to be wearing this side more often. But when I want to reverse it, I am still able to use the collar piece itself on both sides. I just made sure that it was dark because I wanted to hide it. Now, if you want, you could actually use a cape and then cover all of this backside as well, because I did not make it as high as it's supposed to and go all the way up to the back of the nape. So that is the top finished. Woo! Don't you dare. This is the yellow fabric in question, and I will be turning this into the skirt. So I'm going to cut off this little line here and then turn this into like a skirt. I'm going to go ahead and find something that's a nice straight edge and then cut off the rest of this salvage edge. From the salvage edge that I just cut off, I'm going to be using it to create the waistband. I cut out 4 inches width and then my waist measurement. I'm going to join the 2 pieces together to create one long strip. I also sewed it down so it's nice and flat. Fold the waistband in half and iron it down. This is going to create that nice crisp top edge. I know I could have gone with a simple gathered skirt, but I didn't feel like that was appropriate, seeing as most of the time Disney skirts are ball gown style, which are very wide and spread. So I'm going to attempt an A-line skirt with the amount of fabric I have. I laid the fabric down and then folded it in half, and then I'm about to attempt to cut it into pizza shapes. So it's going to be really thin at the top and then really wide at the bottom using my waist measurement. With the leftover pieces of yellow fabric that I cut off, I want to use these for godets and make the skirt flare a bit more. Before I sew the entire skirt together, first I'm going to sew together some of the godets so they become one piece, and then I'm going to pin it to the bottom hemline first and then begin working my way upward on the skirt. Slight problem. I did not account for my booty to be giving me a problem, so now there's this big gap. The rest of it fits really nicely. I was hoping to have the entire thing look like this side, but my butt's big. And in order for me to rectify this, I can either A, go out buy more fabric, which is not acceptable at the moment, or I can just take the rest of the scrap material here and just put it in. It may not be the prettiest fix, but it is a fix. So again, remember to include the booty measurement. So I should have actually widened this part a lot more because it didn't go around my hips at all. So remember to take your hip measurement and your waist measurement when you're doing this part and then cut appropriately. So what I'm going to do is take the largest square out of this and just put it right here and call it a day. And here I attempt to go ahead and take out all of that nice fabric that's left over to fix my booty problem in my skirt. What I'm going to do is first pin together this new spot fixie piece at the top of my waist, and then I'm going to be pinning the godet to this. This way it fits a little bit better and it isn't so wonky. Now I'm just going to pin my waistband to the top and we're going to sew it together, creating a skirt. Sew the waistband and the skirt together, then clean up the raw edges. For my closure of my skirt, it's not very Disney princessy, but it is a closure nonetheless. I'm going to be using this bright goldenrod zipper. I'm going to just put it at the sides and then sew it down as normal, making sure that it starts somewhere and ends somewhere and it can zipper up. Now that we're here at the skirt, we're going to take the waistband, make sure the zipper tape is folded on the inside, and then we're going to fold it over with the raw edges going upwards into it, and then we're going to pin it across, making sure it's easy to sew, and then sew on top of this line here, creating kind of like a bias tape, encasing all of the nasty little edges, and it's nice and pretty. Here we go, and fast forward, pew! Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I will be using this cute lace for the hem. I'm going to be using this kind of like a bias tape. On the right side, pin down the entire hem line with the lace. Carefully sew at the edge of the tape. Now take your hem and fold the lace to the wrong side of the fabric and then sew down the top part of the lace, securing it in place, making sure that you have the right color thread so it doesn't appear weird on the other correct side. Using some of my earlier cut pieces for the sleeves that didn't make it in, I'm going to be using them to create my headband. So I'm definitely going to be using these side small long line pieces, and then I'm going to use this one here. I want it to be able to go around my head and then create a bow at the top. What I want to do is make sure that I make a long enough chain first. I do like this length, so I'm going to go ahead and sew these two together here. Ideally, this would be great if you just had a really long, thick ribbon, but I don't have one, so of course I'm going to go ahead and sew one and make one. This is essentially the same method as my waistband. I'm going to sew the pieces together first, then I'm going to pin it to itself, creating a long tube, and sew the tube as close as I can to the side. After that, go ahead and flip this inside out, and this should be perfect for going around your head and creating a little bow. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little tutorial. Make sure to stay away from bad apples and remember to wash your hands, wear a mask, be kind to one another. If you haven't checked out any of my newer videos, go ahead and check out them up around here floating around me. Remember to subscribe to my channel and remember, what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, my favorite. Stay inspired, be creative, and I will see you in a future video. Bye!